Hi there, Valerie Sjodin here, and I am going to refurbish and repaint an old table of ours on the patio. I'll show you right here. And you'll see it's all scratched up. And I am going to use this new stencil by StencilGirl Products. We live in a mid-century modern house, and it's time to repaint my furniture. It seems like I do this every 10 years. I'm excited to show you the process. So my first thing is I'm going to sand it down with my sander, put a coat of white primer, which could also be a finish coat. And then I think I'm gonna paint it gray. I like the gray background that I originally had done on this, but we'll see. I'm not actually sure, but I do know I'm going to use my stencil here. And I like it's nice and big and has lots of cool mid-century modern shapes. Okay, I'm gonna get started. On the left here, you see I have a variety of stencil brushes. I just wanna say the first one that you see on the left is very stiff, the white one, and it didn't work that well. But my favorite thing to use in stenciling seems to be the cosmetic sponge. I went through a few on this project, and also these two stencil brushes. You'll see a kind of mop brush that has loose bristles, and the other brush next to it, I think it's a plaid stencil brush. That was just fine for what I'm doing here. So all that to say, you can use the materials you want. It may be good to practice first though. For the paint, I found some in the storage closet, and I also used the Valspar primer and finish coat that I used to prime the table in the first place. What I did to make colors is I added some of my golden fluid acrylics to the white paint. I'm not saying I would recommend this, I'm just saying this is what I did, and I put it in a little Play-Doh container so I could use it for other projects as well. After I taped the stencil down on one end, I used my blunt edge mop brush and stenciled the turquoise. And the key is to have a dry stencil brush and to use a straight up and down kind of tapping motion. That will keep the paint from bleeding underneath the stencil. You can see here how I faded it off just by lightening up the pressure and then eventually stopping. Then I added some of the periwinkle paint on top so that it faded into the turquoise. Next was the green, and I did the same thing. This time I'm using a kind of round sponge, pouncing stencil sponge, and I don't like it quite as well as the brushes, but it works fine, so it's personal preference. Next was the white. I knew I wanted to include some white for contrast, and I just used the same primer that I used on the base of the table, and as well the same paint I used to mix some of the other colors. I used a cosmetic sponge and went through a few of them for this. It really wore them out. I had mixed some orange, so then the orange was next, and I did the same thing. And then what I thought, it looked so flat that I went back in with some of my white paint on the cosmetic sponge and just lightly tapped some of the edges of the stencil, and I think it really enlivens it and gives it a kind of luminosity and depth that it didn't have when it was just flat. So I'm really liking working with this big size of stencil on a table like this. And what I did for the other side is I simply turned the stencil around, taped it down, and then started with the green. So I'd have the green organic shapes on top of the turquoise organic shapes that did not line up. Okay, then I went ahead and did the green just like I did on the other side, tapping as I go with my dry brush, and same with the turquoise, and then again with the periwinkle. It dried really fast. I was working outside, and so I didn't really have to wait for any dry times. Then I finished it off again with a light sponging around the edges of the white paint. I'm so pleased with how this turned out. I did add one other stencil here. You see this star stencil by StencilGirl Products. It's a 6-inch stencil, and I really like it because you can layer it. It can either have the look that it has on the stencil, but I alternated colors just by shifting the stencil over with the second color. And you'll see on the bottom that I use part of the stripe in the stencil to do the middle white and orange, and then darker gray around the edges. So there it is. There's my mid-century modern patio table done gray and dark gray, and with these colors with the new mid-century modern 12 by 24 stencil by StencilGirl Products. Blessings to you as you create.